February, the month of love. A time for celebrating the most important connection you can possibly have in life. So let's ruin it by talking about some of the worst relationships in Greek myth. We have fun here, don't we? Greek mythology has a very interesting habit of taking a genre that's usually filled with wonderful, happy, wholesome stories with good endings and saying, now let's traumatize people. Let's just ruin everybody's day instead. And we're going to talk about 10 examples of such stories, in no particular order, though number 1 is definitely number 1 for a reason. Fair warning, we are going to be discussing some really disgusting behavior in this video, and also keep in mind, there are various versions of pretty much all these stories. I just tried to go with some of the more messed up versions because that's today's theme. Let's get going. Aconteus and Siddip. This is a story of manipulative incel behavior being ultimately rewarded. Yay. The story goes that a man named Aconteus was perusing around the island of Delos when he came upon a beautiful woman named Siddip at the temple of Artemis and became infatuated with her. So instead of, talking to her and seeing if she was interested, he instead decided to take an apple and write down the words, "I swear by Artemis that I will marry Aconteus," and then he threw the apple at her feet. She, of course, picked up the apple and read what it said out loud out of curiosity, not realizing that by saying those words out loud, she was actually making a binding promise to the goddess Artemis. She apparently did not return Aconteus's affection, but each time she tried to properly marry someone, she became very ill before the wedding, and it just couldn't take place as a result. Eventually, her family sought out answers for this, and the oracle told them that the reason this kept happening was because Artemis was punishing her for breaking that promise that she had made. Who knew the most anti-marriage goddess would take this kind of thing so seriously? But apparently there was no other way out of it, so in the end, her family consented to have her marry Aconteus. Yeah, that's a really great way to get together. Number 9. Mira and Cinrius. At one point, there was a really stupid queen named Cenchraius, and because she was really stupid, she decided to go around bragging that her daughter Mira was more beautiful than the goddess Aphrodite. Stupid. Aphrodite was pretty pissed about this and decided to respond by punishing the daughter. Aphrodite cursed Mira with a constant, insatiable desire to sleep with her own father, Cinrius. Ew. The desire gets so bad that Mira attempts to take her own life to get it to stop, but her nurse finds her, and after Mira tells her the truth, she at first tries to get Mira to give up on this desire, but when she realizes it's not going to go away, she decides to help Mira get what she wants. Shortly after, there was a 9-day festival where several women, including the queen, were not allowed to be touched by any men for the duration. This left the king a little sexually frustrated, and after the king got overly drunk, the nurse seized the opportunity and told him that there was a beautiful young woman who really wanted to sleep with him waiting in a dark bedroom. So the king went over to the bedroom and, well, he did what people do when they're drunk, sexually frustrated, and in a private room with someone who desperately wants them. You do the math. And it repeated for several nights until the king decided, you know what, I would like to know who it is I'm piping in the dark, and so he decided to bring a light into the room, and when he saw that it was his own daughter, he really freaked out and tried to kill her. She managed to escape, and not knowing what to do with herself, she begged the gods to help her. So the gods decided to help by turning her into a tree. Thanks. Yeah, that's real helpful. She then proceeded to give birth while in tree form to her son Adonis, who was somehow really handsome despite his parentage. You would think he would not be handsome. Number 8. Cassandra and Apollo. Cassandra was a princess and priestess of Troy who drew the attention of the god Apollo. Apparently, she agreed to give herself to him, either sleeping with him or marrying him, or both, in exchange for the power of prophecy, which he did give to her. But she later went back on her word and refused to be with him, possibly because of her devotion to virgin goddesses. Apollo, though, was not going to take that lying down, and for his revenge, he decided to add an unfortunate side effect to his gift. Even though Cassandra could see the future, Now, no one would ever believe a word she ever said about it. She foresaw the fall of Troy, the deaths of everyone she cared about, but when she tried to warn people, she was always just written off as a crazy person. In some versions, they even locked her away to get her to shut up. And so, she could do nothing but watch as her city, her family, and eventually even her own children were all killed in front of her, all because of a disagreement with Apollo. Though there is another version where Apollo actually tries to force himself on her while she's sleeping, and she wakes up and stops him, which is why he curses her, and that version's even more messed up. Eos and Tithonus. Eos, the goddess of the dawn, at one point hooked up with the god Ares. No big deal, you'd think, since they're both single, but Aphrodite disagreed. Since Aphrodite was frequently cheating on her husband with Ares, she decided that no one else could have Ares, even though they weren't really together. But either way, she angrily cursed Eos with an insatiable desire for mortal men, and this resulted in Eos constantly hooking up with any guy she could, and even abducting some of the more handsome ones. One such man who she abducted was Tithonus. Eos snatched him away from Troy, and kept him in her bed with her every single day. She was so enamored with him that she soon begged Zeus to give him immortality so that he could be with her forever, and Zeus granted this, but there was a bit of an oversight. She had asked for immortality, but not for agelessness. Apparently that's separate. So, while Tithonus didn't die, he did grow older and older, becoming extremely weak, losing his mind, and not even being able to walk or lift his arms anymore. Eventually, Eos just locked him away in a room all by himself, letting him waste away, begging for death. Gee, what a wonderful partner she is, huh? She does at some point decide to turn him into a cicada. Whatever good that does. Number 6. Eos and Cephalus. Yeah, like I said, Eos abducted multiple men, and another one of these was Cephalus. Eos snatched him away while he was out hunting, and then proceeded to have her way with him enough times to birth 3 kids. Thing is, though, Cephalus was already married, and never stopped wishing to return to his wife, Procris. After 8 years of this, Eos finally relented and let him go, but she wanted to cause more drama for some reason and told him there's no way that his wife wouldn't have cheated on him during this time. What Eos said apparently got to him because he went to his wife disguised as another man and tested her, and unfortunately, Procris failed the test, and did consent to sleep with what she thought was a different man. After he revealed himself, she was very ashamed and ran away. However, the two did find each other again and made up sometime later, so this looks like a happy ending. Until Cephalus went on another hunting trip. You see, Procris was worried that Eos would try to take him again, which is an understandable thing to worry about, so she secretly followed her husband. Cephalus heard movement in the bushes while he was hunting, and, assuming it was an animal, he threw his spear at it, killing his own wife by accident. When he saw what he had done, he dove off a cliff. Yeah, there's the Greek ending we know and love. Number 5. Dionysus and Aura. Aura was a woman who prided herself on being untouched by men, so much so that she decided to be really stupid and compare herself to Artemis. She mocked the goddess, saying, "I kid you not, that Artemis's boobs were too big for her to truly be a virgin." Surprise, surprise, Artemis was furious and conspired with Nemesis and Eros to get back at Aura. Together, the gods caused Dionysus to become madly in love with her, though he knew she would never be with him willingly due to her proud maidenhood, so he used his wine to drug her and force himself on her in her sleep. There also seems to be another telling where the gods catch him in the act and say, "Dionysus, what are you doing? You can't just have your way with that woman. You have to marry her first." And thus they conduct a wedding ceremony between Dionysus and Aura while Aura is still sleeping. Classy. Either way, Aura wakes up pregnant and gets so mad at what has happened that she goes around slaughtering innocent herdsmen and drenching the hills with their blood. After giving birth to twin boys, she tries to feed them to a lioness, but the lioness refuses because she's the only character in this story with morals. So Aura instead throws one of her little boys into the air, lets him fall on the ground, and then eats him. Jesus Christ. Artemis rescues the other child from her, though, and then Aura drowns herself, and Zeus turns her into a spring. Stop turning people into stuff! In what way do you think that's helping? Number 4. Hippolytus and Phaedra. I'm sure you all know the story of Theseus, the hero who slew the Minotaur. This is the tale of his wife who wanted his son. When Theseus married Phaedra, he already had a son named Hippolytus, named after his mother Hippolyta. Phaedra fell in love with Hippolytus and tried to seduce him Pornhub style, but Hippolytus rejected her. Angry at being turned down and worried that Theseus would find out what she'd done, Phaedra immediately went to her husband and lied that his son had tried to force himself on her. Theseus gets so mad that he asks Poseidon to kill his own son Hippolytus, which he does. And then Phaedra takes her own life. Yeah, a lot of these stories end that way. There is an alternative version of this story, though, where the reason Phaedra wanted Hippolytus so bad was because he was a follower of Artemis who had vowed to always be a virgin, and the goddess Aphrodite took that personally and got mad. So she caused Phaedra to desperately fall for him. Aphrodite and Artemis seem to appear in many of these particular tales. The Danaids. There once was a king named Danaus who had 50 daughters. Damn, dude, pull out. His brother, Aegyptus, had 50 sons. What an insane coincidence. And wanted his boys to marry Danaus's daughters. Danaus didn't really like his nephews, though, and so took his girls and sailed away to Argos to prevent the marriages from happening. But it didn't work. Aegyptus tracked them down and insisted they all be married. So Danaus agreed, and then resorted to giving each of his daughters a knife and instructing them to murder their new husbands on the wedding night. And 49 of them did exactly that. In one night, 49 innocent men were slaughtered simply because Danaus and his brother didn't get along. The only one who didn't do it was his eldest daughter, Hypermnestra, who had actually fallen in love with her fiancé. Danaus was so angry at this that he put her on trial for not committing murder. There's some logic for you. But she was fortunately acquitted. Some even say the goddess Aphrodite came to her defense during the trial. About time that goddess did something nice. The other daughters would end up greatly regretting their actions, though. Word of what they had done spread, and soon no man wanted to marry any of them, for obvious reasons. After they all died and passed on to the underworld, they were then told that they had to wash away their evil actions by filling a particular tub and bathing in it. The catch being that the tub leaked out a lot faster than it could be filled, and so they were doomed to spend eternity trying in vain to fill it. Oh, and fun fact, Hypermnestra and her husband were the ancestors of the hero Perseus. So if she had done what her dad said to, we wouldn't have gotten that story. And he's also the ancestor of Heracles, so wouldn't have gotten that one either. Hermaphroditus and Salmachus. Hermaphroditus was named after his parents, Hermes and Aphrodite. He is where the term hermaphrodite comes from, and a lot of people have asked me to talk about this character for a while because they believe him to be a symbol of progressiveness and trans inclusion in ancient times. Well, that's not how the story goes. Not at all. Sorry. Hermaphroditus was a very good-looking young man who drew the attention of a nymph named Salmachus while he was at a pool swimming. Salmachus at first approached Hermaphroditus and tried to hit on him, but when he said he wasn't interested and told her to leave, she refused to take no for an answer. She jumped onto him, wrapped her body around his, and began attempting to force herself on him. Hermaphroditus fought back, and when she realized he might overpower her, she resorted to praying to the gods that she could be joined with him forever, and for some sickening reason, the gods granted her wish. Before Hermaphroditus could break free, he and Salmachus were fused together into one being, both man and woman. He was trapped forever with his attacker. So, yeah, I don't know if that's a particularly inspiring story. All of Zeus's relationships. Was there ever any doubt? Zeus has become the Greek mythology poster boy for toxic romantic behavior. He was originally married to Metis, but devoured her when he heard a prophecy that her son would rise against him. He then decided he wanted his sister Hera, but she didn't want him, so he turned into a cuckoo bird to trick her so he could force himself on her, and then pressure her to marry him to maintain her honor. And then he just proceeded to cheat on her constantly, and then do almost nothing while Hera tormented the women he slept with. Turning himself into a swan to force himself on Leda, turning himself into a bull to kidnap and force himself on Europa, turning into an eagle to kidnap and force himself on Ganymede, turning into a satyr satyr to force himself on Antiope, turning into a golden shower to force himself on Danae, turning into an ant to force himself on Medusa, however that works, turning into Alcmene's husband to trick her into sleeping with him, turning into his own daughter Artemis to trick one of her huntresses into sleeping with him, bringing Cynara to Mount Olympus, then getting insanely jealous because she went to visit her mother and turning her into an artichoke, banging his own sister Demeter in the form of a snake, having a daughter with her, then turning into a snake again to bang that daughter. Yeah, Zeus wins. It's really no contest. Like, is there any argument to be made? And yeah, that's 10 examples of really insanely horrible love stories in Greek mythology. You could argue none of this is real love, but the Greeks called it love, so that's the logic we're going by. Hopefully, these stories have made you feel more grateful for whatever person you have in your life. Or if you don't have a person in your life, hopefully these stories made you glad that you don't. But yeah, there's definitely way more horrible love stories in Greek mythology, but we'll be here all day if I try to do all of them. If you want to hear more of them, maybe we'll do it next year. You can let me know some particularly crazy ones you'd like to see covered, or you can let me know some particularly crazy details about this story I may have forgotten to mention. Love is really weird sometimes, and the people who write about it can get even weirder. I don't know how to end videos.